You have felt guilty without understanding exactly why. You have given in during an argument even though you knew you were right. You have worked more than you needed to prove something no one asked you to prove. That was not weakness. That was the result of a game you did not know you were playing. Everyone plays psychological games, not exceptionally manipulative people. Not psychopaths or clinical narcissists. Your colleague who always seems reasonable, but somehow you always leave meetings, having agreed to something you did not want. Your partner who never asks directly, but somehow you always feel you have failed them. Your family member who genuinely loves you, and still uses that love as leverage when they need something. Most of these games are not conscious. That is the detail that changes everything. The people playing these games with you, most of them, did not wake up with a manipulation plan. They learned patterns that work, parts reinforced over years because they produced the results needed. And you, without knowing, were the environment that reinforced those patterns by giving in, by blaming yourself, by working harder to fill a gap that was never yours. This does not make you naive. It makes you human. But continuing not to see the games has a cost. Before revealing the 5 games, understand why they work. Every psychological game exploits one of 3 fundamental human needs: the need to be accepted, the need to be consistent, the need to avoid conflict. Not weaknesses. Evolutionary structures that enabled group survival for hundreds of thousands of years. The problem is the environment changed. Need 1. To be accepted. Naomi Eisenberger, UCL. Abraham Maslow placed belonging as one of the most fundamental human needs, above only survival and safety. Decades of social neuroscience research confirmed what Maslow intuited. Social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Researcher Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA demonstrated this with neuroimaging. The anterior cingulate cortex, activated by physical pain, is equally activated by social exclusion. Being rejected literally hurts, not metaphorically, neurologically. Any game that threatens, even implicitly, your acceptance in an important group or relationship has immediate access to your most primitive defense system. Need 2. To be consistent. Robert Cialdini identified consistency as one of the most powerful influence triggers. Humans have an almost compulsive need to act consistently with what they have already done, said, or committed to being. This is the commitment and consistency bias. It is exploited systematically through a simple technique, getting you to commit to an identity before presenting the request that identity obligates you to fulfill. You do not give in to the request. You give in to the identity you do not want to contradict. Need 3. To avoid conflict. Most people do not avoid conflict because they are cowards. They avoid it because conflict has real costs: energetic, relational, social. The problem is when someone learns, consciously or not, that you avoid conflict, because from that moment, the mere implicit threat of conflict becomes a lever. You do not need to be directly confronted. The conversation just needs to take a tone that signals imminent conflict, and you retreat. And the retreat confirms the pattern, and the confirmed pattern is repeated. Eric Berne and Transactional Analysis. Psychiatrist Eric Berne spent decades mapping what he called psychological games in Games People Play, published in 1964. His definition: a psychological game is a series of complementary transactions progressing to a predictable outcome, where all players, conscious or not, obtain some form of psychological payoff. That last part changes everything. All players get a payoff, including the one being played. Not necessarily a positive payoff, but a payoff that confirms something, a belief about yourself, about others, about how the world works. And that confirmation, however painful, has psychological value that keeps the game going. Psychological games do not persist because one person is strong and the other is weak. They persist because both need them to persist. 3 rules before we begin. First, each game has a name. The name is not an accusation. It is a map. Second, Each game has two sides, the player and the one who allows the play. Neither is necessarily acting in bad faith. Third, recognizing the game does not force you to leave it immediately. It forces you to stop pretending it does not exist. Game number 1. Yes, but. This is the most common game in workplaces and the most frustrating in close relationships. The mechanics are simple. Someone presents a problem. You offer a solution. They respond, yes, but you offer another solution. Yes, but. Another. Yes, but. The conversation continues indefinitely, and at the end the problem remains exactly where it started. The real mechanism. The mistake most people make is assuming the person wants a solution. They do not. What they want, at a level they often do not recognize themselves, is validation of the problem. Attention to the suffering. Confirmation the situation is impossible. The game is not about the problem. It is about what the problem keeps in place. Example. A manager calls a meeting to solve a process problem. Someone suggests a solution. Yes, but leadership would never approve. Another alternative. Yes, but we tried that before. A third. Yes, but the timeline does not allow it. 2 hours later, the meeting ends with no resolution. The function was never to solve the problem. It was to demonstrate the problem cannot be solved. Cost of staying blind. You invest creative and emotional energy in solutions that will never be accepted. You leave each conversation with a diffuse sense of uselessness, as if the problem is your inability. Over time, you withdraw, offer less, try less. Without understanding it weighs the game, not your competence, that produced this result. Game number 2. See what you made me do. This is the most present in close relationships, and the hardest to name because it is always wrapped in genuine emotion. The mechanics. A person acts in a harmful way, to themselves or others, and frames that action as a direct consequence of someone else's behavior. If you had not pressured me so much, I would not have said what I said. I only did this because you ignored me. You pushed me to this point, and then act surprised at the result. The structure is always the same. Harmful action, plus because you transferred responsibility. The psychological mechanism. Albert Ellis. There is often a grain of truth in the accusation. Maybe you did pressure. Maybe you did ignore. And that grain of truth is enough for you to absorb responsibility for what you did not do, while responsibility for what was done evaporates. Example. A couple argues frequently. Whenever he explodes in anger and says hurtful things, the justification is the same. You know how I get when you act like this. You keep doing it on purpose. She begins monitoring her behavior, anticipating what might provoke. Diminishing herself before the provocation happens. Months later, she is completely reorganized around his mood, and he never needed to examine his own pattern. Cost of staying blind. You stop trusting your own perception. You start processing every situation through the wrong question. What did I do to cause this? Even when the honest answer is nothing. Game number 3. Courtroom. This is the most intellectually sophisticated of the first 3, and the most common in high-performance corporate environments. The mechanics. A person, or group, constantly positions you as someone who needs to justify, demonstrate, prove, not because your actions are questionable, but because the position of needing to prove keeps you perpetually on defense, and whoever is on defense is not advancing. Are you sure this is the best approach? Have you considered all alternatives before deciding? I just want to understand your logic here. The questions seem reasonable. They seem careful. But notice the pattern. They are asked selectively, about you, rarely about the decision-maker's own choices. The power dimension, asymmetry of scrutiny. Machiavelli identified something modern power dynamics researchers call asymmetry of scrutiny, where the level of questioning applied to one person's is systematically higher than applied to others in the same position. Example. A competent professional receives a high-profile project. Every decision is questioned in team meetings. Other team members make similar decisions without the same scrutiny. 3 months later, the professional is producing half of what they produced before, not because they lost competence, because they now spend more time building justifications than executing. Cost of staying blind. You never receive a direct accusation. You never have a declared adversary. Only questions that seem reasonable, and an accumulated exhaustion you cannot explain. And the explanation you find, because the mind needs explanation, is that maybe you really are not as competent as you believed. The first 3 games are patterns you recognize. With some effort, from the outside in, the last 2 are different, because they come from inside, from bonds you protect, from people you love or loved, whose power over you does not come from strength. It comes from history. Game number 4, Poor Me. This is the hardest game to name because naming it seems cruel. How do you call suffering a game? How do you name as strategy the pain of someone you love? Here is the distinction that makes this possible. Real suffering and suffering used as leverage are not mutually exclusive. The person may be genuinely suffering, and simultaneously using that suffering to produce specific behaviors in you. One does not cancel the other. The mechanics. Eric Berne. A person communicates their suffering, often passively through nonverbal signals, veiled comparisons, stories that imply but do not directly accuse, in a way that produces guilt, pity, or obligation in others. There is no direct request. A direct request would be vulnerable. It could be refused. Communicated suffering cannot be refused. You cannot say no to someone who is suffering without becoming the villain of the narrative. The phrases of the game, "Do not worry about me, take care of your own life," said with a specific tone. After you communicated, "You cannot attend something. I always gave everything for this family," said when someone tries to set a boundary. "I think I am getting old. You have your lives," said when adult children try to create independence. Each of these phrases simultaneously activates guilt, gratitude, and fear of abandonment, 3 forces converging on the same behavior. You give in. You come back. You give up what you were building. Example: an adult woman decides to accept a promotion in another city. When she tells her mother, the response is not anger, not argument. Silence, followed by, "Of course, go. You need to achieve your dreams. I just do not know how I will manage here alone, but do not worry." No accusation, no request formulated. But the daughter spends the following weeks unable to feel good about the decision. The game did not need harsh words. It only needed visible suffering and calculated silence. Cost of staying blind. The game does not stop you from advancing with force. It makes you advance with permanent guilt. You go, but halfway. You achieve, but cannot feel it. You build, but always with one eye behind you. Game number 5, Now I've Got You. This is the most disturbing game on the list. Not because it is the most common, but because when you finally see it was played, you realize it was being built for a long time. The mechanics, the freedom hook. The game begins with permission. The player establishes a situation where you, apparently, have total freedom. Do it your way. I trust you completely. You do not need to ask me. Make the decisions you think are right. And you act on that freedom. You decide. You execute. You act as if the trust is real. Then at some point, usually when you have made a decision that did not please them, or when they need a lever, they use what you did with the freedom they gave you against you. You made that decision without consulting me. I trusted you, and you did this. A responsible person would have asked first. The freedom that was granted retroactively becomes responsibility for which you must be judged. Example: corporate. A manager delegates full authority for a project, communicates to the team that the person has complete autonomy, remains silent during execution. No feedback, no guidance, no alignment checkpoints. When the project faces difficulties, or when the manager decides they need a narrative of accountability, they return with ad-tailed list of wrong decisions. You should have consulted me before moving forward with this. The person cannot defend themselves without seeming to avoid responsibility. Cannot point to the lack of guidance without seeming to blame the manager. The trap was built with the involuntary cooperation of the victim. Example: relationships. The most devastating version happens in relationships. When someone gives you space, more than you asked for, more than is natural, not because they respect you, but because they are observing what you do with the space. When someone encourages your independence with generosity that seems almost too grand, not because they want you to grow, but because each step of your independence is being recorded for future use. The generosity was the hook, the freedom was the rope, and the trap only closed when you were fully inside it. Cost of staying blind. The cost of game number 5 is not just the moment the trap closes. It is what happens after you realize it was built. How much of what I felt was real? On whom can I trust when I receive freedom without asking? The nervous system that was betrayed deeply enough learns to treat generosity as suspicion. 5 games, each with its own mechanics, each with a specific cost of not seeing. Now the part most content on this topic gets wrong. They give you the patterns, then tell you to leave all of them, immediately, firmly, without hesitation. That is advice from people who have never had to apply what they teach. Most of these games happen in bonds that have real value beyond the game. The partner who plays Poor Me also genuinely loved you. The manager who plays Courtroom also gave you real opportunities. Leaving abruptly without considering context is not strategic intelligence. It is emotional reactivity with psychological vocabulary. 3 questions before acting. Question 1. Is the game conscious or unconscious? This distinction matters enormously. A consciously played game, where the person knows what they are doing and continues, is fundamentally different from an unconsciously played game, where they learned a pattern that works and repeat it without examination. Unconscious games are more common and more accessible to intervention. Conscious games require a different response. Someone who knows what they are doing will not change just because the game was named. They will adapt the game. Question 2. What is my payoff in the game? Remember what Berne said. All players get a payoff. Yes, but gives you the feeling of being the generous solver who never gives up. See what you made me do gives you the position of someone powerful enough to cause others' actions. Poor Me gives you the position of caregiver, essential, irreplaceable. Courtroom gives you an explanation for your lack of progress that does not require examining your own ambivalence. None of these payoffs are positive long-term, but all serve something short-term. And until you examine what you are gaining by losing, you will keep playing. Question 3. Does the bond survive without the game? Some bonds are built on games. The game is not an element of the bond. It is the structure of the bond. When the game stops, the bond stops too. Knowing this before you intervene does not tell you what to do, but it lets you make a conscious decision about what is literally at stake. I will be precise about what seeing these games will cost. When you start seeing games in conversations that once seemed normal, you will see more than you wanted. You will see games in people you love, in family members who were your anchors, in friends who were present at moments that mattered, in partners who gave you real things alongside the games. And seeing the game does not erase what was genuine, but it changes your relationship to the bond in a way that does not reverse. You cannot enter the game with the same innocence, cannot give in with the same naturalness, cannot absorb responsibilities that are not yours without knowing what you are doing. That is gain. But it comes with loss, the loss of the comfort of unconsciousness, which is real comfort, even when what it protects is a prison. The two costs side by side. Cost of seeing. You will feel discomfort in conversations that were once easy. You will need to make harder decisions about bonds that were once simple. You will carry the weight of knowing what is happening, without always being able to act on it immediately. Cost of not seeing. You will keep leaving important conversations without knowing what happened. Keep giving in on points that matter without understanding why. Keep accumulating a diffuse sense that something is wrong, without being able to name what. Keep working harder to prove things no one asked you to prove. Both costs are real. but only one produces something beyond itself. 5 games. Yes, but see what you made me do. Courtroom. Poor me. Now I've got you. You recognized at least one, probably more. And if you were honest during the section on payoffs, you recognized one where you are not just the one being played. That is not an accusation. It is the honest functioning of a system that will free you more than anything else this video offered. The question you will carry, not the 5 definitions, not the 5 names to memorize and apply as diagnoses in your next conversations. That would be using knowledge as a weapon, and weapons used in relational contexts produce debris, not clarity. What you will carry is a question. One simple question you can ask, silently, internally, in the middle of any conversation that leaves you with a feeling you cannot name. What is being kept in place by this conversation? Not who is manipulating me. Not what game is this. A problem that cannot be solved. Responsibility that cannot be taken. A decision that cannot be questioned. A boundary that cannot be set. A step that cannot be taken. The answer to that question is the map of the game, regardless of what name you give it. The opposite of games, autonomy. Eric Berne ended games. People play with an observation that has stayed with me since I first read it. He said the opposite of psychological games is not the absence of relationship, not coldness, not isolation, not generalized distrust. The opposite of games is what he called autonomy. In the technical sense he used, the ability to relate without needing the game to get what you need. Ask directly for what you need, instead of building games that force the other to give it, to sentient what the other offers, without needing to turn the offer into debt or trap. Say no without needing a game that justifies the no. Say yes without needing a game that guarantees the yes will be accepted. Autonomy is not absence of vulnerability. It is vulnerability without strategy behind it. You will leave this video and sit in a conversation, and you will hear something that once passed through. Yes, but you made me, are you sure that? Do not worry about me. I trust you completely, and for the first time, you will know the name of what you are hearing. That does not solve everything, but it solves one fundamental thing. You cannot leave a game you do not know you are playing. Now you know. Subscribe, not for more content, for the ability to see comment. Which phase have you noticed most often? Share this with someone who keeps leaving conversations confused.